is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, Gata, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Tolahungva. Here are the headlines for Wednesday, October 28th. Since we broke the story last week of the Phoenix Indian Medical Center closing its OBGYN department, we are still waiting for a response to our request for an on-camera interview. We have heard from more mothers who were turned away from PIMC. We learned the Arizona congressional delegation is asking for a review of the situation as well. We will continue to follow the story and find out why the decision was made to close this vital department and why were mothers not given clear direction on insurance opportunities they still have. PIMC sent a statement saying the OBGYN clinic is closed temporarily, but does not say when services will resume. The Pasquayaqui tribe in southern Arizona will not have an early voting site this year. The tribe filed a lawsuit against the Pima County Recorder, Ann Rodriguez, after she refused to assign an early voting site to the reservation. Tribal leaders were aiming to have this early voting center in operation this week, along with a ballot drop-off site. Attorneys for the tribe say removing the site violates the Voting Rights Act because its members had unequal access to voting sites compared to other communities in Pima County. Despite transportation concerns, U.S. District Judge James Soto ruled late last week there was no evidence that tribal members on the reservation will be denied the ability to vote. About 7,000 enrolled members live on the reservation, and 1 in 3 do not have a vehicle. In our coverage of Native Vote 20, Indian Country Today is following the races of 14 Native American candidates running for Congress from both parties. Most are hoping to sit in Congress for the first time. But a few are incumbents running for re-election, like Democrat Sharice Davids, who is Ho-Chunk. She made history when she won in 2018 to become one of the first 2 Native women to be elected to Congress. Now Davids is running for re-election to represent Kansas's 3rd congressional district. Kansas is a battleground state, voting for Clinton in 2016 and voting for Romney in 2012. Davids currently sits on the committees for transportation, infrastructure, and small business. Davids faces off against Republican newcomer Amanda Adkins for the congressional seat. With only 4 post offices and limited polling places scattered across roughly 2,000 square miles, the Rosebud Indian Reservation faces an uphill battle to cast their mail-in ballots. Home mail delivery is rare on the Rosebud Indian Reservation, so some make a round trip of more than 60 miles to check their mail or to vote. Native Americans have a long history of exclusion from voting. Some states, including the Dakotas, had laws preventing tribal members from voting into the 1950s. In recent years, voting rights advocates and tribes have won or settled 86 election-related lawsuits. Despite the difficulties, community leaders are emphasizing the importance of voting. 2 local organizations in the Southwest are partnering to address domestic violence on the Tohono O'odham community. The grassroots community organization Indivisible Tohono and Emerge Center Against Domestic Abuse released a video called The Untold Story of Violence, where they honor the memories of loved ones. Founder of Indivisible Tohono, April Ignacio, says about 90% of cases in Tohono O'odham Tribal Court involve domestic violence. The prevention program works directly with people who harm their partners to discuss the historical context of violence in Indigenous communities.
It's a gradual process, and it's very, it's a labor of love because this work is centered around community and not around Band-Aid programs. So it's like an ongoing conversation within the community about what a life without violence looks like for us.
Ignacio says it's important to move away from the punitive approach because it can cause more harm to victims. Indivisible Tohono is working with the community to further develop the program and its increasing outreach to youth. Vision Maker Media is offering a free online spooky-themed film festival just in time for Halloween. Nightmare Vision highlights the achievements of Indigenous talent in the horror, sci-fi, and thriller movie genres. The festival will feature films from fictional narratives to documentaries. Vision Maker Media is offering the event on its website on both October 30th and 31st, and it will also be available on YouTube, Vimeo, and Facebook. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today for Wednesday, October 28th. I'm Patty Thalahungva. When we come back, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We'll see how this cancer affects Native people. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and the American Indian Cancer Foundation is raising awareness on breast cancer screenings. It's the second leading cause of death for Indigenous women in the U.S. And recently, the American Indian Cancer Society released data on the number of missed screenings since the start of the pandemic. Those numbers have the organization concerned. And to talk about those concerns, we have Melissa Buffalo, who is the Deputy Director at the Foundation. Welcome, Melissa.
Hello, thank you.
Well, you have every year you've held this Indigenous Pink Day to help raise awareness for breast cancer screening. Tell us about how that day went this year, and we'll start there.
Yeah, so Indigenous Pink just held its 6th annual campaign. As a national organization, our goal is to reach as many communities as possible and raising the awareness, increasing the capacity, and also educating our community members and our leaders on the importance of screening.
And so, and in this pandemic, what have you learned about people not going to doctor's appointments, including any kind of screening for breast cancer?
Right, so we think about those clinics that didn't always have maybe the mammography resources, so they'd probably bring in a mammo van. And so when we looked at COVID, that really stopped. You know, we closed down, we weren't really doing preventative care. So our goal is to really look at those missed screenings that you mentioned, 22 million missed screenings for the top 5 cancers. And so what does that mean for Indian country? That's a scary thought. So our goal is to really emphasize the importance of screening, and that cancer is preventable through those screenings.
It absolutely is. The earlier you detect breast cancer, the more treatable it is. And so for women, and when we talk about the age that this can happen, what age population is at risk when it comes to Indigenous women?
Yep, I think age is a factor, but we also have to think about genetics. So women can start getting screened as early as 40. Recommendations look at 40 to 44 or 45. So really that 40 to 50 year age range is when you want to start thinking about talking to your doctor about the importance of your health, breast health.
And then that sets your baseline to compare in subsequent years when you go back for your screening. And how often should you go back for a screening once you have that initial exam?
Again, great question. We think about those conversations you should have with your primary caregiver, looking at your family history of breast cancer, cancer in general as a history. And so every year, and then looking at, again, what are those conversations with your doctor? And then does it turn to every few years once you hit 65?
Wow. And you talk a lot about indigenizing the breast cancer screening. What do you mean when you say indigenize that screening?
Right. So we want to make resources that are reflective of the communities we work with. So when you see a resource from the American Cancer Society, you probably don't see culturally tailored resources. So we want to be able to take information provided through various sources and be able to indigenize and reflect that this infographic or this resource looks like you or your family member or somebody in your community. And so you're probably more attuned to want to read it and read up on that information and be able to connect and see that this is you as well.
So really understanding that from a cultural perspective, and then sharing those stories, with your family there, because so often in the past, people just didn't talk about something like any kind of, and back in those days, cancer was pretty much a death sentence. So maybe that's why the people didn't talk about it. But how important is it to share these stories and to share this information about someone who's going through breast cancer treatment?
Yeah, I think you said it best. We want to normalize screening, and that cancer is preventable through those screenings. And so having those conversations with your loved ones we want everyone to be an advocate for your health, and then you can encourage your loved ones, men, women, partners, everyone in the community can encourage each other to think about those screenings and the importance of it, especially during COVID.
Tell us some of the stories you've heard. What have you heard from women who either have gone in to get screened and have found that they have breast cancer? What are some of the stories they've shared with you in their journey?
A lot of us don't do the work we do because it's just professional. It's also personal. So we think about those stories and how important they are. I think we've had, not I think, I know we've had 3 relatives all had breast cancer. And so their journey together and how important that was. I've had 2 aunts who were able to have early diagnosis because they were able to have those conversations. And so they were able to beat breast cancer, and to be able to celebrate that and lift up those stories so that others can see the importance of that just really resonates within our communities.
And tell us about the shirt that you're wearing. You have, again, some of the branded items for Indigenous Pink Day. What did you do with the t-shirt there?
Yeah, again, just what is that? What are those opportunities to create resources? And again, we know we love our native gear. So how every year we do a shirt design. Last year we did artists that, we highlight their work. And so this year, again, as a national org, how can we highlight all communities and not be so specific to a region? But we also do this as a fundraiser as part of our foundation and a campaign. So using these dollars that we fundraise from the t-shirt sales to go back into those communities with resources and educational infographics and such.
And in this pandemic, how are you continuing that outreach? A lot of us are on Zoom, having meetings and things like that. How are you reaching out to people?
Again, our website and social media has been a big source for us in reaching these communities, as well as, really working with the clinics and communities so that they can share this information, be able to get the word or the tools and resources they need. Because we think about, as a small foundation, we can't be everywhere. So how can we really give these tools and resources to the communities to be able to connect with those patients and those members who are at risk and who need a screening?
And let's talk a little bit about men, because up to now it's been primarily a conversation about women, but men have mammary glands, and men can also get breast cancer. So how do you reach out to the men?
Yep. So this year was our first year that we really did focus on men are thinking about all bodies have breast tissue as one of our newer hashtags. And it really did well as we looked at some of our social media insights and analytics. But we do know that all bodies have breast tissue. And although we don't have the most accurate data, as those numbers are low for men, we do want to be inclusive and encourage, if it is a family history, your chances of getting breast cancer are higher. So wanting to include both men and women in that conversation.
And how have the men, how have they responded to your outreach?
I think good. I know, part of our team is men, and being able to see them in the shirts and knowing that they're family members and that we do have those. I remember one of our posts showed a 5K run in Florida, and seeing some of the men participate and encourage has just been, it's a good feeling for me to see that this work is reaching other places.
Well, that's encouraging. And yes, a lot of races are dedicated to this, whether you walk or whether you run, but getting that word out and encouraging family members to screen, to get those screenings there. How soon do you start educating young women about this? Because when you're in your 20s, you think you're just like you're made of kryptonite and you can't have any kind of health problems or anything like that. How do you reach out to a younger generation to prepare them so when they hit their 40s, this is in part of their plan to get checked?
Right. I think again, just normalizing this conversation, and that as Native people, we have a right to advocate for our health, and that's everyone from the youth to the elders, and being able to know that are they also taking care of their bodies by having annual PAPs? And so being able to build those conversations in with your doctor and your community on what's going to happen when you turn 40, and that should be normal, and that you should be okay asking your doctor for that screening, and that options should be available to you, whether you're at a Indian health service or a different hospital system.
And you've also incorporated Native languages into your campaign. Tell us how you did that and what you're doing.
Yeah, so again, as a national organization housed in Minnesota, really wanting to bring resources again that reflect each community. So we did last year create a signs and symptoms resource called Check Your Breast. So we're able to print that in Ojibwe, as well as have a blank one. And so what were some of those languages that we could really incorporate? And we've been able to do that throughout our other campaigns and not just Indigenous Pink.
Oh, that's got to be kind of interesting to hear all these different words for that, for just talking about, breasts and, when it comes to a medical exam, how important it is to get those screenings.
Right. Very important. I mean, cancer, again, we know is preventable, and we know the health disparities that exist within Indian country. So if we can do our best to get that information out there and educate individuals on that important perspective that cancer is preventable through these screenings, how many lives can be saved. And the earlier diagnosis, the more options you have to treatment. And that's really too what we want to get to, is being able to give community members the options for treatment and not have it be a death sentence, like you said at the beginning, because unfortunately women are being screened at later diagnosis for breast cancer, which limits treatment options. And that's a scary thought.
Yeah, it's so, we probably all know people who have gone through this, and for some people, their pain tolerance level may be higher, and so they're not understanding that the pain that they have could be something more serious. And so it's not like, tough it out, it's okay, you can get through this. It's no, go check out the pain, right?
Yep, and that's important to, we know, your body best. Be aware of those signs and what are those symptoms you're feeling that weren't there before. Not only being able to be comfortable, checking your breast, but being able to know what those signs and symptoms are and having a conversation with a relative, and then being able to know that you should be able to talk with your doctor about that, and they should be able to advocate for your care along with you.
All right. Thank you so much. Any last thought, any last pitch to have people go get screened before we leave?
Yeah, again, just driving home that cancer is preventable. You have every right to advocate for your health care to be a better person for you and your community and your loved ones.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Melissa Buffalo, who is the Deputy Director at the American Indian Cancer Foundation. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And when we come back, we'll talk with Dalton Walker, who is covering the story about the Phoenix Indian Medical Center closing its OBGYN clinic. We'll be right back.
Our team from Indian Country Today will be bringing you live coverage on election night. I'm Mark Trahan.
I'm Patty Thalahungva. In our studio in Phoenix, Arizona, we'll have teams in place to keep you updated on Native candidates.
And from our Washington, D.C. Bureau, I'm Jordan Bennett-Begay. I'll be bringing you the coverage on the race between Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
So tune in to Indian Country Today. I'm Aaliyah Chavez, and remember our hashtag, NativeVote20.
We've been covering the story of the Phoenix Indian Medical Center closing its OBGYN clinic. It's based here in Phoenix, and Dalton Walker is our national correspondent, and he's been on the story from the start. Welcome, Dalton.
Bonjour, Patty. Good for having me.
So let's walk through a timeline of what we learned and when, and how many mothers that we've been able to identify that's been affected by this sudden closure.
We've published multiple stories on the matter as we work to learn more about the closing and when it will potentially reopen. Initially, we heard from people that worked at the hospital regarding the closing, which wasn't really made public to anyone. So we talked to them. We also interviewed moms who have had issues or who have prenatal work done with the clinic and are about to give birth. And then we also reached out to IHS officials. And then we learned of a letter sent to the leader of IHS. There was by Congress members representing Arizona, demanding answers to a series of important questions regarding the closure. And now we've asked for an interview with the head of IHS, Director Michael Wihaki, and we're just waiting for him to respond.
And this story certainly just is so sudden and so shocking, because for decades, Phoenix Indian Medical Center provided birthing services, prenatal services, and then of course, care for the child after it was born. And so many mothers have come to the hospital to have their children. And it's important to remember that Phoenix Indian Medical Center serves not just Arizona, but also Nevada and Utah. And we recently learned of even mothers coming from California, because there is no IHS hospital there that has services like this, and who had planned to come to the Phoenix office to have their child. So talk a little bit about some of the stories that you reported on from these mothers.
We've spoken to a few moms, and we've had additional moms reach out to us to share their story. So there's a number of stories that we've told, about to tell. But yeah, we've got these experiences of dealing with the issues that PIMC presented with disclosure as a first-person perspective from moms who are, their only focus right now is, what am I going to do to the baby? How can I have the healthiest birth possible? And then this happens, and it's kind of threw them into an unknown area, and unfortunately, there's even one who's not sure what they're going to do next. And I recently spoke with a former leader of PIMC, and he kind of walked us through a little bit about when he was the CEO there, regarding how things kind of worked on his watch. And it doesn't sound like things are working the way they were when he was there. And as I mentioned before, we're hoping to get more answers and basically a time when this is going to reopen. A lot of moms are depending on this service.
And you received an email from the Phoenix Indian Medical Center saying that while the delivery department was closed, they were still going to take care of prenatal visits. And then that same day, we had the mother that we interviewed, Brianna Almond, who went there for her prenatal visit, and at the end was told, "This is your last prenatal visit. We're closing this department down as well." And she has 5 more weeks left. She's delivering, or her due date is at the end of November. What about just the process of explaining to the women, the mothers, what can they do? What is the next step? Can they apply for insurance if they are not eligible for Medicaid or the Arizona insurance for indigent people? What can they do? That seems to be not explained to these women by PIMC.
When we were writing the initial story that it closed, I reached out to IHS to kind of answer some questions, because a lot was unknown and no one was really talking on their end. And they explained that they were offering a lot of pre-birthing services still, like prenatal and other checkups. And I mentioned, we learned that a mom who was 35 weeks was told that she is no longer offered service. And this was after I heard from IHS. So this week I reached out again to confirm if that is the case, if IHS indeed has stopped it, and I haven't heard back from that end. And when I do, we'll definitely let people know what the update is. Regarding the insurance aspect, that's kind of the other side of this, with moms not having a place to go on this federal program that provides health care. What are the other options regarding giving birth in the hospital? 2, how am I gonna pay for that, since it's not a IHS PIMC affiliated place? The interesting part is that a lot of moms are initially told to apply for Access, which is Arizona's version of Medicaid, as the very beginning step regarding health insurance. And if they qualify, which qualifications are pretty tough, if you have a job, if you're working part-time, you might not even qualify, unfortunately. But if you did, that specific Medicaid program would pay for pretty much the whole process. And when I spoke with Dr. Molina, he mentioned that there are other options. The affordable health care plan is another option, but there's also a premium involved. But he said that premium is very low cost, and that should be considered. And he also stressed that to seek advice, like if PIMC I'm not sure what they're telling moms to do or how they're guiding them through this important process. We've heard mixed reactions, some frustrations, and as I mentioned before, IHS isn't being clear on what they're telling. But Molina offered Native moms to go to this nonprofit that he's connected to, Native Health, which is actually nearby the Phoenix Indian Medical Center. And you could walk in and they would walk you through insurance options. And that visit, that connection is at no cost for Native moms. And Native Health does work with a provider that are a health provider that offers birthing services. And they really work with you regarding payment options, what opportunities are out there at the very low cost, if at any cost at all.
All right, well, Dalton Walker will continue following the story, and we do want to let people know that until our story posted, PIMC did not have any kind of notice on its social media sites or its website until after our story came out. So good job, Dalton, and we'll continue to follow this.
Thank you, Patty.
And thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. Your life is precious. I'm Patty Thalohungva. Join us again tomorrow.
Indian Country Today is recorded at the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center in Phoenix, Arizona.
This is Indian Country Today.